Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Blog Series. It's Saturday, September 20th, 2025. And on Saturdays, we talk about sports and humor. And here we are on September 20th on the cusp of the changing of the seasons into fall, something of a miracle in and of itself. And we've been talking about miracles all week this week. And so today we're going to focus on sporting miracles. Nowhere, I think, do we see more remarkable statistical improbabilities or things that might be considered borderline miracles than in sports. One of the most famous incidents was actually named the Miracle on Ice. That is the 1980 U.S. upset of the Soviet Union's hockey team in the semifinals in the Winter Olympics. It was actually part of a round-robin tournament at that point. But why was this considered to be a miracle? Well, the Soviets had dominated international hockey for the last couple of decades, much like Canada had dominated in the first couple of decades of Olympic competition. That is, the Soviets had won the gold medal at each of the preceding 4 Olympics, and they were expected to do so again in Lake Placid in New York. Why? Well, because the Soviets had all of these well-seasoned, veteran, professional hockey players on their squad, whereas the U.S. had the youngest team at the Olympics on average, and they were also stacked only with amateur players. And yet, of course, the U.S. team competed incredibly hard. They had already made something of a splash by defeating the heavily favored Czech team before facing off against the Soviets. And many know the story. You can check out the footage, you can check out the book, the movie, etc., all of the same title, Miracle on Ice. But bottom line is that the U.S. fought relentlessly against the Soviet Union back in 1980, and they clawed back from a 3-2 deficit entering the third and final period. And at 8:39 of the period, the U.S., at the tail end of a power play, Mark Johnson launched a shot that went under the Soviet goaltender Vladimir Mishkin's glove and into the net. And that tied the game at 3-3. And then, with exactly 10 minutes left in the game, U.S. captain Mike Eruzione fired what turned out to be the game winner into the net from the high slot. And so that gave the U.S. its first lead of the game at 4-3, which they sort of nervously clung to for the remainder of the game. And then Al Michaels, you probably heard this, if you can catch this on YouTube pretty much anywhere you like, but his famous comments at the end of the game kind of sort of live on forever. 11 seconds, you've got 10 seconds, the countdown going on right now. And Morrow up to Silk, 5 seconds left in the game. And Kent Dryden, it's over. Do you believe in miracles? Yes. That's Michael's famous call. Do you believe in miracles? Now, of course, that wasn't actually the gold medal at that point. Somehow they had to come down from that incredible high. And once again, they managed, they had to play one more game against Finland. And so they were actually down again that game, 2-1 as well, entering the third period. But once more, they rallied, and in this case, they tallied three unanswered goals, and they won the game 4-2, and of course, took the gold medal home as a result. Now, interestingly, a lot of people don't remember the 1960 U.S. Olympic hockey team, which also went on to win the gold medal after defeating both Canada and the Soviets. Again, Canada and the Soviets ultimately took the silver and the bronze, respectively. And so, anyway, the point is that for the record, the U.S. men's hockey team has won gold medals at the Olympics, at least, just twice, in both 1960 and 1980. And of course, both times also only on U.S. soil. So talk about a home team advantage. Now, in contrast, if you look at women's hockey, and especially at the Olympics, which only dates back, by the way, to 1998, the gold medalists have always only been either Canada, which has won 5 times, or the United States, which has won twice. And heck, they're usually playing each other in the finals. Sweden broke through only once to win a silver medal. Other than that, it's always been either Canada gold, U.S. silver, or vice versa. And so I think the miracle would be that if in the 2026 Olympics, Winter Olympics in Italy, the miracle would be if someone other than the United States or Canada were to win the gold in women's hockey. So we'll see what happens. Now, of course, if you'd also told me years ago that the Washington Capitals hockey team which managed a record of 8 wins, 67 losses, and 5 ties. That is 21 points in their opening their rookie season back in 1974-75. If you told me that those Capitals, or at least a later version, obviously, would win the Stanley Cup before the vaunted Toronto Maple Leafs would win another Stanley Cup, I'd have said that'd be a miracle. And yet that's exactly what's happened. So the Capitals, of course, were pathetic in the 1970s. They became a very solid franchise in the early 1980s. And then they actually had a fair number of successes over the next couple of decades. And most notably, they had their first Stanley Cup Finals appearance back in 1998. But of course, none was bigger than their winning the Cup at the end of the 2018 season. The Leafs, unfortunately, have not won a Cup since 1967. And heck, if you told me that the Stanley Cup would go to a U.S. hockey franchise for the next 32 years after Montreal last won in 93, I'd have said no way. That's impossible. And yet that's what's happened as well. So while ice hockey is arguably Canada's game, the Stanley Cup itself has not resided north of the 49th parallel since 1993. Again, 32 years and counting. And heck, it's landed in Florida, of all places, in 4 of the last 6 seasons, twice in Tampa Bay with the Tampa Lightning, and then the last 2 years with the Florida Panthers. Of course, there are a lot of Canadian players on teams throughout the NHL, but the point is that the Canadian franchises themselves have been remarkably inept since 1993. They've lost all 8 times that they've even gotten to the finals since then. Now, of course, there have been many other miracle moments in sports too, meaning incredible kind of statistical improbabilities as much as anything else. For example, the fact that both the University of Virginia men's university basketball team and the Toronto Raptors NBA team both won their first ever, and only at this point, championships in the same year, 2019, strikes me again as something of a miracle, at least an incredible statistical improbability. And since I'm actually from Virginia originally and grew up close to DC, I could even throw in the Washington Nationals as the Nationals, not as the Washington Senators, but the Washington Nationals winning their first World Series that same year, 2019, as well. So imagine what the odds would have been that the UVA men's basketball team, the Toronto Raptors NBA team, and the Washington Nationals would each win their respective championships in 2019. So I imagine you wouldn't have even been able to place a bet on that kind of a parlay. Who knows? But think of how rich you'd be if that's what you'd bet back at the beginning of 2019. And of course, there have been many, many other miraculous, incredible sports moments throughout history, spanning the full range of competitive sports. Think of the greatest upsets ever, for example, or the most amazing feats that you'd think of as virtually impossible. And these would all qualify as miracles, at least in terms of statistical improbabilities, like Michael Phelps winning 8 gold medals at a single Olympics. Yep, that's been done exactly once. And obviously it requires that you have to be participating in a sport where at least you can have the option or the potential to compete in 8 different events in the first place. So that already makes it a relatively rare event, statistical improbability. But then again, you could look across sports, across the globe, and come up with all sorts of incredible statistical improbabilities. You have Sir Donald Bradman's cricket average, or career test batting average of 99.94, which is nearly twice as high as the next best players in all of cricket history. It's a statistical gap that's basically unmatched in any other sports. You've got Wilt Chamberlain's 100 points in a single game, and then for that matter, his 50 plus, I think it was 50.4 points per game scoring average in the 1962 NBA season. Again, no one's come anywhere close since then. Other than Chamberlain. I think he averaged 44 points a game the next year, and then after that in the 30s and then lower. But anyway, you understand the point. You have Joe DiMaggio's incredible 56-game hitting streak in baseball. You have Leicester winning the Premier League in English soccer. I think the odds were something like 5,000 to 1 in that case. Maybe Ruth I don't know how you say her name exactly, but Chekingich's She was the first female runner to break the sub 2:10 barrier in the marathon in last year's Chicago Marathon. So again, breaking sub 2:10, well, that would be on a par with many of the great men performances. Now, I know the men are closer to 2 hours these days, but historically and even up until relatively recently, if you break even today, if you break a 2:10 in the marathon, you're pretty remarkable. You're an elite runner, shall we say. And she was the first and only woman to have broken that 2:10 barrier. You've got Wayne Gretzky as the only player in NHL history to have tallied 200 points or more in a single NHL season. That includes both a point each for each goal and for assists. And so not only is he the only player to have ever done that, he also, of course, then by definition, he's done it 4 times in total, but he also did it 3 years in a row. So, but is that kind of dominance really a miracle, you might ask? And I guess it all depends on your perspective. So what's the greatest miracle or statistical improbability that you're aware of across all of sports? What stands out for you? What's something so rare that you think it might never happen again in sports? And those, of course, are the rarest instances by definition, and I'd say something of a miracle. Okay, well, that's it for today. As ever, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. Hopefully, see you back here tomorrow.